Hello and welcome to Fresh Off the Dome, your topic-based podcast. That's all killer, no filler. We just talk till we just get sick of the topic and just move on after that with our lives and see how it carries out from then. I'm your host, Brian Nabeshin Jackson, and joined with me is my very, very good friend, Barrett Courtney.
Why, hello there.
Hey. So we're here to talk about Justice League. Um, I should preface this a little bit. Like the whole starting out with this thing, like why I wanted Barrett in particular, is because of
Yeah, you were very adamant about that.
yeah,
You
like,
hit me up, and I was like, it felt bad because I was already booked pretty much for the weekend. And then you hit me up later. You're like, hey, I really want to have this conversation with you, and I think it'd be dope. And I was like, all right, man, like let's do it.
yeah, because like I remember your old podcast with BCG, and you did a review of Man of Steel, and like that was I can't even find that video anymore. I think that's just gone to the
So
ether.
the Man of Steel was actually, I think that was a Twitter video.
Oh, that was
Uh,
that because it was lengthy, right?
Because it was no the Man of Steel specific one. Because Man of Steel came out in like when I was back in high school, and I had rewatched it before going in to see Batman v Superman
Yeah,
because
that's
it'd
the
been a
one I saw.
while.
Uh huh.
And so the Man of Steel one, I actually Andy Cortez, who if you don't know him, he is someone from Kind of Funny. But before he was on Kind of Funny and helping them out, he was working at Rooster Teeth, and he would do his Andy 30-second reviews of things. I really liked that format, and so Man of Steel, when I rewatched it for the first time in like 3 or 4 years, it actually ended up being worse than I remember it being. I was
Hmm.
just so pissed about it that I was like, "There's only one way to really review this movie," and it was doing an Andy's 30-second review style review video where I just mocked the entire movie. And then yeah, and then I remember doing the Batman v Superman review. I think with
These are
Ricky
Ricky.
Valdez-San, and
Hmm.
then I believe, and then the other DC movie we did, I'm pretty sure we did a Suicide Squad one, and I think I either did that one with Alyssa or Henry, because I know
You
Alyssa was
did
in a lot of those.
Civil War with Alyssa. I don't remember who you
Okay,
did Suicide Squad with.
yeah, I'm not. I feel like we did a Suicide Squad one at one point, but yeah, I'm not too sure. Or maybe we didn't. That might have been at the point where
That might have been a
I
reaction to the trailer, maybe.
yeah, I don't know. It's all the BCG days are definitely a hazy time in my life right now.
Hmm.
But yeah, being a very big fan of DC Comics and especially Batman is one of my favorite IPs of all time. I feel very passionate about how Warner Brothers handles these movies. So I've definitely spoken up about my opinions on every single one of them so far.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So like starting off with that, then this is going straight into Justice League. I want I want three things. I want your updated opinion on Batman v Superman. If it's still the same, because like you left for generally liking it, more or less, because I rewatched the video, all hour and a half of that. um, I want what your thoughts on Justice League was, and like in general, and I also want to know your, this is a weird question, but like your theater, like how was people in the theater while you were watching that movie? I'm just really curious about that.
okay. So with my thoughts on, so you want my thoughts on Batman v Superman, you want my thoughts on Justice League, and then you
Mm.
want the theater going experience. Okay,
Yes, yes, yes,
pretty much.
yes.
So my updated thoughts on BVS is like I haven't gone back to it. I haven't like rewatched like the director's cut or anything, and sort of looking back on it now, it's one of those movies, and I think I'll probably say the same with for Justice League when I talk about that in a little bit. It doesn't feel like it has a true identity. It feels like it's being pulled into a bunch of different directions, and it doesn't really know where it wants to go. And I feel about that way with most Zack Snyder movies. And I constantly question people who are like, man, like Ben Affleck nailed the role of Batman and Bruce Wayne and all this stuff. When in BVS, I don't think and I didn't hate Ben Affleck, but it was one of those things, and especially in Batman v Superman, where I didn't feel like I got to see him enough to really judge whether or not he nailed the character of Batman, because everybody was pulling to the scene where it's the really cool fight scene where he's saving Martha, and like, yeah, that was a really cool fight scene. It was definitely something out of the imagination of like the Batman Arkham games, but that doesn't really like just because there's a cool fight scene doesn't mean you're nailing the character of someone, right?
Hmm.
And so that was always like my sort of question. It's like, yeah, just because there's that one cool fight scene doesn't mean like Ben Affleck is really in the shoes of Batman and what that like persona is truly. So I just didn't feel like we got enough with him. And with I've never been a huge fan of Superman, but I know Superman can be an interesting character when he's written in a different perspective than his sort of like 1960s Silver Age sort of persona, right? Like he's
Hmm.
very like that side of Superman is very boring, typical. He saves everyone and everything's all right at the end of the day, sort of thing. And it was one of those weird things where that definitely at first wasn't the Superman that was in this universe, but then like sort of by the end of Batman v Superman and especially in Justice League, that's what he turns into. So like even though I wasn't a fan of what Superman was at the beginning of this universe because it was so dark without like dark for the sake of being like a darker version of Superman, which I don't think was like the right way to go about him to try to make him interesting.
Right.
And the when they decide to go the whole oh he's happy go lucky and he's everybody's sort of hero sort of thing, it sort of felt disingenuous and felt like oh you're changing this character to try to appeal to the audience, but you're also just making him even less interesting now. uh,
Yeah.
and then with Wonder Woman and Batman v Superman, it was one of those things like, yeah, she was cool, but like I forget which video I watched, or it might have been I think it was a Twitter thread where someone was talking about like the moment you finally see the big three on screen, and it doesn't really feel as significant as like when the Avengers finally team up in the Avengers in 2012, because you see in the event in the MCU, you see all of those characters have developments and struggles within themselves and struggles with relationships with each other, and then it was so satisfying to see them finally come together for like the greater good and to put their differences aside and to like come out as a team. And with Batman v Superman, it was like, oh yeah, Batman and Superman are friends because their moms are named Martha, and Wonder Woman's there because Bruce hit her up in a text and was like, "Yo, you up?" And it just didn't feel like that satisfying moment. So it was like real. I was really bummed out. Like that was how they decided to show those three characters for the first time on screen, like fighting one villain together. It was like it just didn't feel it. It didn't pay off, and so that, and I feel like that's the entirety of what BVS is. It's like it doesn't pay off, especially with the characterization of like Lex Luthor and whatnot. But that's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
And then my thoughts on Justice League is I definitely enjoyed myself more watching Justice League. Like Ezra Miller as the Flash, like even though I was very not behind it when they announced it, and it's like because it was around the time I was getting into the Flash TV show because my girlfriend Alyssa was watching it. I was really behind Grant Gustin's version of the Flash, and so like Ezra Miller, I like Ezra Miller. I've like he's great in Percy Being a Wallflower, and I think I've seen him in a couple other things, and he's a really great actor. And so I was very like, let's see how this guy works out. And
Hmm.
so, but he's really fun. He's definitely not like Barry Allen, but he's a very fun quirky interpretation of Barry Allen, which I did enjoy. I like Cyborg, even though like I like Cyborg's sort of arc that he has of like realistically how would someone feel when they are brought back from the dead by their father, and the reason that they're brought back is because they've been attached to alien technology that's been associated with almost the destruction of Metropolis and whatnot. So I understand his sort of moodiness there, but it was also a frustration of like, okay, yeah, I get why he's so moody and why he doesn't like to talk to people, but he's not the cyborg like that I want him to be right now. He's not like screaming out like "booyah," and he gives us a little, he gives us a hint at the end, but it wasn't the like I wanted the like he was badass in a way, but not in like the Teen Titans from like 10 years ago badass that like
Mm.
I wanted, and like where he's still like goofing off and he's still like a teenager, right? Like I don't get that like, and even though he in this universe he's definitely a little older because they talk about him being in college and whatnot. I
Yeah.
like he's still like he definitely had he's like begrudgingly old man, weirdly enough. Like that's like what his mood is like the entire time. And then like Wonder Woman I've definitely grown to like, especially since her movie came out. I really liked that movie except for the third act.
Yeah, that was
But
collectively terrible. Yeah.
yeah, but like I liked it because of her character growth, and so to see her in this and sort of even like I thought it was cool that even Bruce was like, I can't lead these people. I need to push her to like try to lead these people, and so I thought that was cool, and she's really fun to see on screen all the time. And Aquaman was fun, and we have a discussion on Justice League on this week's Zero Life that goes up on Wednesday, youtube.com/Zero Life. Um, and Alyssa Shimoda makes her debut on Zero Life, so she
Oh, she finally gets to talk about him.
yeah, she comes on to talk about Aquaman and specifically Atlantis and how she was very proud of like a Polynesian, like even though like she is Hawaiian, but there's still like a unity of Polynesian people. So she was very proud that this Polynesian man was cast as Aquaman, which makes sense
Hmm.
because their heritage is so tied with the ocean and that whole like Pacific region, and so it was really important for her. And she says in the episode, like seeing Jason Momoa as Aquaman was just as important for her as the entire movie of Moana. And
Hmm.
but then she talks about how frustrated she is when you go to Atlantis for a couple minutes and you realize, oh, he's the only
Only.
Polynesian dude, and it's literally just a sea of white people. But then Danny makes a fair point. Like we only got to see it for a minute. Maybe in Aquaman's movie, we see that like sort of like Wonder Woman's their island. It's made up of like diverse culture and sort of like Thor as well, where it's diverse people like white people and people of color and whatnot. So maybe it's that kind of situation. But definitely they did not give off that vibe in this movie. So I definitely like I totally see that and agree with Alyssa there, or that's like, man, you guys almost won 100%, but then you didn't.
Yeah,
Uh,
representation matters, bro.
yeah, and so there's that, and when they bring back Superman in this, like it was bringing back Superman in this movie was really cool for the first 5 minutes because he's all angry and he sort of doesn't like really remember like what's going on. He like throws back that line at Batman of like, "Do you bleed?" Which like I thought that line in BBS was really dumb, but I actually
Mhm.
like like how Superman delivers it in this one,
Okay.
even though in that scene he still has the obvious upper lip CGI bullshit going on, which is really bad. And then yeah, like there are definitely fun moments in this one, but it still has the problem of Batman v Superman where it doesn't really have an identity, and like even like right after leaving the theater, I was already forgetting a lot of what happened in that movie because it feels so bland.
Mm.
And I in this episode of Zero Life, I equate it to sort of like the lower tier Marvel movies. Like I don't think it's an awful movie. I think Batman v Superman is a very like bad movie, but at least with
Hmm.
Justice League there's a coherent beginning, middle, and end. There's an actual plot. There are like motivations that make sense. You see these characters come together and it's fun at points. And then but like it just wasn't interesting enough to really remember the entire thing, which I feel about like lower tier MCU movies, which I don't like hate, but they're definitely not like good, like the Incredible Hulk or Iron Man 2 or Thor 2. Um, and so there's definitely th- that general feeling I have for Justice League. I'm interested to see where they go in the future, especially with the end credits, which was sort of cool with Lex Luthor coming back and talking to Deathstroke and whatnot. And uh, but for the most part, it's one of those things where I'm definitely on the middle ground where I see all of the sort of bad things that's still going on in this movie, and I knew that this movie had no chance of being good, to be honest, because
Mm-hmm.
of the state that this universe is in right now. There was no way that this one movie was going to bring this entire universe out of the mud. You know, like Wonder Woman was the first step. Like even Wonder Woman couldn't do it. Like Wonder Woman was the first step, and they took a step out of the mud, but it still wasn't enough to bring the entire universe out of this crap. And Justice League, I feel like, was another step backwards. But not like a huge step backwards, like a half step backwards. It was like, this was like almost really cool, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of things holding it back. And I honestly think that's, you know, I say this every time I bring up Zack Snyder now. Like I can't imagine what he went through in his personal life, and I feel for him greatly. But that honestly doesn't make him any better of a film director. And so I think there's a lot of things artistically and creatively that he definitely just. There's a lot of frustrating decisions I feel like he makes in a lot of his movies. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely that. And then our theater going experience, we saw it in Dolby Theater.
Okay.
Because we have one Dolby Theater in San Francisco in the Metreon Theater, and so we saw it. And I don't feel like it was sold out, but I don't feel like there was like nobody there. I feel like it was like it was not super packed, but like just enough people, which I feel like probably was the same experience for everybody else, probably through the rest of the states, especially considering what it did at the box office, which wasn't, you know, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't even as good as any of the other DC movies for an opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, like I feel like some people clapped at the end, which I was like, all right. Like it wasn't terrible, but come on, I don't think a clap is necessary. Because
Any laughs through the entire thing?
oh yeah, there are definitely chuckles. Like you definitely got the Whedon humor in there a couple of times, where like Superman throwing Batman at one point, and then like it takes a couple away from Batman, and you go back to Batman. He's like, "Oh, I'm definitely bleeding somewhere." There's
Yeah.
like, definitely those like cute little one-liners that Whedon is so good at thinking about, especially like Ezra Miller's character. Again, because this movie's very forgettable, to me at least. I forget a lot of Ezra Miller's one-liners, but like during the moment, they were really fun and quirky, and he delivered them well. And there's definitely like the audience was definitely amused, and there are obviously people there who felt strongly enough to clap at the end. But it was I feel like it was only honestly a couple people. It wasn't like a standing ovation from everybody. So I think yeah, I think I answered those questions as much as I possibly could.
Yeah, you totally did. From my side of it, first of all, Batman v Superman. I already went over this with Logan Wilkinson a few episodes ago about like talking about the superhero movies in general. But like Batman v Superman is, you know, I do not like that movie whatsoever. Very much left a bad impression on me. And it's more of like after that conversation with Logan, like I came to the fact that like I hated Man of Steel more than I hated Batman v Superman. Not necessarily that because like I think Man of Steel is a worse movie than Batman v Superman, but it's just like the fundamentals, like everything started with that movie, and you just see this like seep into Batman v Superman, and just like all that bullshit from that first movie just like seeped into that one, and just made it even worse than what it already was. And I just did not like that movie. I haven't even re-seen it really, but it's like one of those things. It's kind of like one of those car accidents that you just keep looking at, because like anytime someone has like an opinion on it, like I have to like see it just to get their take on it. Like, am I crazy? No, of course I'm not crazy. Everybody hates that movie. But it's like I get like I almost like feel good about it when it's like someone's like talks shit about it. Not necessarily like on our Twitter conversation, because like I don't like bringing down people who are like, you know, genuinely enjoy that movie. It's like, hey, I like this movie, and it's like, fuck you, you're wrong. I don't like that crap. But like when people go like deep analysis into it and just like saying like, oh, this is the reason why I like it, is A, B, C, why I didn't like the movie, or A, B, C, why I did like the movie. So like I'm always interested in sitting in that conversation. Batman v Superman. Oh, sorry, not Batman. Justice League for me. I think like the best analogy for it, like honestly, is like you remember those Garfield movies,
Oh
like
man,
the
I
live action
do.
Garfield movie,
Yeah.
because like you got Bill Murray in it. It's like, oh, that's the perfect voice for Garfield. And it's like, okay, this could actually work, but like it was just done terribly. Like the execution was just terrible on it. But like they got everything they needed. It's just that the execution was just terrible. So like it could have been a good movie, but it wasn't. And that's how I feel about Justice League. It could have been a good movie, but it wasn't. Um, um, like like the one thing I could always say about Justice League, like at least for now on, is like I fucking love that ending. I love how that movie ended. Um, it was lame. It was corny. It's basically like deep and back to the whole of justice. Like that's literally how corny it was at a certain point. But like I really enjoyed how that movie ended. And like
So are you talking about like where they're at Wayne Manor and they're basically setting up their place, or are you talking about the after credit scene?
I mean more of like it's pretty much as soon as Superman shows up, he says like, "I believe in justice," and like he punches Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
Like those whole scenes, Superman actually saving people, and if you can't tell, I'm a Superman fan. Superman actually saving people and like actually smiling and fucking like doing work for fucking once, and it was like, yes, god damn it, because like I don't know if you know this about me, Barrett, but like I very famously said that like they ruined Superman on an episode of IP, and like
Rightfully so.
yeah, and like, this movie does not say that. It
No.
doesn't say that whatsoever. But like you know, it kind of gave me what I wanted at the end, which I fucking enjoyed. And like even though Batman became pretty much Lego Batman at the end of that movie, where it's like, oh hey like I don't not hate you and stuff like that, and just like all these
Yeah.
like weird jokes that he was making, and like actually being jazzed, like, yeah, we're gonna make a Justice League, it's gonna be awesome. And it's like it's just so weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still think overall is a bad movie. This is just straight up. Um, I know I'm going all over the place. It's like everything just like fading into my mind. It's like how
A
I,
lot of thoughts, man.
yeah, it's a lot of stuff that's like coming into my mind. And as far as my movie going experience with that, I went with my best friend Tony to that movie. Not the Tony, you know, another Tony, and
Tony number two.
yes. And pretty much that movie theater was silent the entire time. Like none of the jokes hit for anybody really, except one girl. One girl fucking loved it. It's just like, and you just her and just her alone.
She like she's loved the Justice League the entire time, read all the comics, and she's like, man, they're just nailing it right now.
Yeah, pretty much. And my friend Tony, who's like generally just like a cool mellow dude with these movies. I'm usually the one who's like, I can't believe that happened type of thing, and he's like usually just like, oh, it's okay. It's like it's just a fucking movie. He was the one who's actually raging at the end. It's like I can't believe they fucking did this, and like I never seen them like that. So that was like a weird cathartic thing for me. He's like, oh my god, you actually have emotion type of thing. So yeah, that was a whole thing. I'm seeing that movie. But the shift, like just I want your general thoughts on certain parts of the movie.
Okay.
So do you feel like where do you think this is going now, as far as like Justice League in general? Because like, if you think about because pretty obviously like the whole nightmare scene from Batman v Superman is supposed to be incorporated in this movie with some way somehow, because it's supposed to be that Superman goes evil and like Lois is the key, and like Superman does go evil and Lois is the key, but there was no dark side. There was like all this other stuff, so that kind of makes that whole premonition thing just kind of irrelevant, or even why
Yeah.
even the Flash is even there. So like,
I
what?
thought that was very weird because the route I thought they were gonna go in, and I think this was the route a lot of people who know sort of the death and return of Superman story was that the Superman was gonna die, and then the dark side was gonna be the one who brings him back, and Superman was gonna work for Darkseid for a bit, and they didn't go that route. But I feel like in this movie, Lois was still the key, and I feel like there was still a weird connection between BVS and Justice League in that sense, where Flash comes back, he's like, Lois is the key, and then he
Right.
like morphs back to wherever timeline he's from, and I feel like that's like Ben Affleck interpreted that as like oh, if we bring Superman back, like I need to bring Lois in at one point because he keeps like alluding to we need to bring in the big guns and whatnot, and she ends up being the big guns when Superman comes back. So I feel like there's still some weird connection that they just didn't explain well enough in
Like, do
that.
you think it's just a complete Elseworld thing? Like, in the Elseworld, Superman's evil, and then like, like probably like 20 years later, you see the old Flash just going back to the in the past. Them setting him up to go to the
Right.
past and do that, but like they didn't actually show it, so we're just supposed to
Yeah, they
assume
didn't. They
this.
didn't show it at all, which makes me wonder if there's like maybe they're still gonna do this weird dystopian um, um, Earth
Like,
at one point
yeah.
that's all like desert and Mad Max looking and crazy and stuff, which I would actually be down for, because then your universe would actually have a like a style to it. Whereas right now there is no sort of style in any direction for this universe. It's very um, it's tasteless right now. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing exciting about it. So I feel like if you try to put this universe in a weird dystopian Mad Max world where they're riding crazy bikes and trying to take down Superman stuff, like at least you got something there. So maybe they still go to that point. Maybe Justice League 2 is like maybe sometime before Justice League 2 Lois Lane dies, and that's where they end up, and that's maybe like how it all happens. But they sort of like an injustice situation where Lois
Mm-hmm.
dies and Superman's unborn child dies and he goes batshit crazy. So that could be a situation, but it's hard to say where they're trying to go now, especially like now that they're all together, and it's hard to care that they're together now. So it's really like I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know where they're going to go in the future.
Yeah.
When it comes to Marvel movies, I was able to tell like even the moment I left the theater for Captain America 1, I called it. And I try to bring this up because this is probably the only time I've ever predicted something that actually became true. Because my friend Vinny is a huge Captain America fan. We saw that together. He was pissed because, like, man, like they didn't represent like the relationship between him and Bucky well enough, and like that's like he was frustrated by that. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, I think they're gonna do Winter Soldier for the second Captain America movie. Lo and behold, we got Winter Soldier as the second Captain America movie. Because I had a feeling that they were gonna go do flashbacks of showing off like their relationship and stuff, and because of how quickly Bucky dies in the Captain America storyline, it felt like that's where, like, just in my gut, it felt like that's naturally where they're going to go. And there's nothing in this movie that had me leaning any way or another, right? There was nothing I was like, oh, they're going to do this later on. The only thing I'm thinking about in the future of the DC movies is that they've already said that the Flash movie is going to be Flashpoint, which is like weird that his first movie will be Flashpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And my one prediction is that they're going to use, depending on what the shape of the DC EU is, by the time they get into full production of the Flashpoint, they might use Flashpoint as an excuse to just reboot this entire movie universe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the only direction I could see them going in right now. The only other thing I feel like they really build up in this movie is the what what do they call the villain version of the Justice League?
The Legion of Doom.
The Legion of Doom. Like they sort of set that up at the end, but that's like maybe that's what they're building up with like Lex Luthor and Deathstroke, but it could just be like a dumb just alliance between them. Who knows? So it's hard to say where they're gonna go. I don't even know where I want them to go. Like, to be honest, I'd rather they just stop production on everything, maybe except for just Wonder Woman, and maybe just figure it out from there. And yeah, I don't know, because I'm not sold on this Batman, and that's where you have to sell me on this universe is Batman, because that is my favorite IP of all time. So when you don't have
Mm-hmm.
me sold on this Batman, and when the actor of this Batman doesn't even want to be Batman anymore, it's like, well, what, like, why should I be invested in this anymore? And there's rumors of Jake Gyllenhaal being Batman, and in future movies, and it'll be interesting to see how they play that out and if that's actually going to come to fruition. But yeah, it's hard to say where they are going to go, and it's hard to say where I even want them to go at this point.
Yeah, it's so disjointed now that it's like it doesn't even make sense anymore, in like in all shapes and forms. Because uh, like even though I didn't like those movies, like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman had like a general concept of like, oh, what would it be if superheroes were in the real world, and how
Yeah,
all those consequences will pay off. Like, Superman the court scene in Batman v Superman, and like
yeah.
people actually dying in Man of Steel. Um, and like like you can make it so like these people actually have consequences, but now they're at a point now where it's like just fuck it, just fuck everything, because like like they're like mourning Superman when like the whole point of Batman v Superman was just like, oh, is he with us or against us? And like it was like after like because they weren't there, they didn't see like him really sacrifice himself, but like
No,
they give
the
him
general
a
public would not know that Superman like is actually like fighting for the people. When the general consensus during that entire movie was that like, yeah, Superman's a dick. Fuck that guy.
and like the whole situation too, like oh, I just remember something. Like I remember the scene where Superman showed up. Like when he woke up, got the mother box, and like or woke up from the mother box and like was alive again. Like he fought them for a minute, and then Lois shows up. Batman about Lois, and like she's just pretty much like blatantly saying like Clark, and it's like there's like a couple of policemen that's right there. So like secret identity doesn't matter at all in this universe whatsoever. It's so funny. I think there was a point where Batman too was just like they were just openly just saying Bruce. That's what it was.
Well, like
Well,
Batman's openly saying Alfred
yeah,
throughout the movie.
it was Aquaman and Bruce walking with each other, and like he was calling him Batman. He was literally calling Batman in front of all those other people. It's
Yeah,
like I don't understand why they can't get like fundamental stuff right in these movies. It's like it's so weird.
well, again, it doesn't surprise me when you have someone like Zack Snyder at the helm, and then with this main movie that where all these characters have to come together, it's two different directors, and so there's almost not like enough like I don't even know like enough time or communication between the two or something about what the fuck the continuity is and paying attention to like little details like that. Uh, yeah, it's definitely frustrating where it's like, well, what do we just do an Iron Man situation here where just people just know that Bruce Wayne is Batman now, or like what? Like if you're gonna go that route, just go all the way in. Like don't just sort
Yeah,
of like tiptoe around it and be like, oh yeah, we'll just say Bruce's name totally outwardly while he's dressed up as Batman, right? So
and like
it
apparently
just
Clark Kent's alive again when he died in Batman v
yeah,
Superman. So it's
and it's
like,
just
hey, sure, why not? Just go on and just do that. So
and it's one of those things right now. I think the most frustrated I am with this universe is how, like, even from the beginning, right? And like everybody was sold on that Man of Steel trailer, right? That
fuck
trailer
yeah, dude.
because like even though I had Zack Snyder's name on it, because even at the time I was like, that's a risk because the only movie I like of his is Watchmen, and the only reason I like that movie is because there's a very well told story in the comics and it's very stylized. And he literally changed only one thing from the story that actually made the story make a little more sense. And he made it super stylized in the movie. So I was like, all right, I'm down. As a huge Watchmen fan, I'm down for this movie. But
Mm-hmm.
everything else of his is like, it's not great. So I was a little nervous about that. But then, like, you see Christopher Nolan's name pop up as like a fucking executive producer, and you have like this very emotional trailer. You have the Superman theme, which they have now played 1,000,000,001 times in 3 movies, and the point is like a joke. Like whenever it plays now, I just start laughing. Uh,
Do you mean the dun dun dun
yeah,
dun
dun,
or?
dun, 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 which is like going to be a very deep cut, but it's like that song is like the intro to like every Angels and Airwaves song. So it's just like it's funny. It's funny to me on like that level as well, where it's like, and they're really trying to be deep, but like Tom DeLonge was writing these songs while he was high off of Vicodin like 8 years ago. So I don't even know what to think of this anymore. But like their first mistake, and I know it's because of how well Nolan's trilogy went. Their first mistake was trying to make this, like you said earlier, a universe where it's putting these superheroes in a very realistic world, because that's not like you can't really do that with these characters. Like that's what Watchmen is about. Watchmen is making more realistic versions of these characters, not just with how they get their powers and how they work in society, but also their character psyche and how they operate personally within this universe, right? But like the
Mm-hmm.
psyche of Superman, the psyche of Batman, like and even Wonder Woman to an extent, like you can't have those superheroes, you can't have those characters in a realistic universe like ours and make it work for a general audience, you know. And like you could do it with Batman when you literally had when you don't have to worry about any of those characters living in that shared universe. That's why Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy works so well,
Mm-hmm.
because Batman is, even though he's the dumbest character, like when you just think about it, he's the dumbest character out of all of them because he's a guy who dresses up in a wetsuit that sort of looks like a bat and beats people up when he has no superpowers. But it's also the most realistic because he has no superpowers, and because from the comics he has a very human psyche, and he is a very human arc, and his his whole in developmental progression is a very realistic thing for people. When they go through tragedy, they get stuck on one thing for the rest of their lives, that they are just caught in a loop. And that's very much what the relationship between the Batman and Joker are, is this
Mm-hmm.
loop of him putting himself in the situation over and over again because he's mentally stuck. And that's a very realistic thing, and that's something that could work in a realistic universe like ours. And that's why the Dark Knight trilogy worked so well, because it was these very realistic things that could happen in our universe, but you just throw in a guy who wears a bat costume, and that's why it works so well. But then when you try to like come into that mentality with a guy from a planet called Krypton, who is sent down there as a baby and gets like all of these superpowers that um, literally make him more power. He's the ex machina of every single movie he's in. He's literally the ex machina of Justice League, where they are losing so hardly to Steppenwolf, one of the most forgettable villains, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then Superman literally comes in and saves the day and beats the guy up in like 2 minutes. It's like, oh yeah, you guys should have done this at the very beginning of the movie, and then it would have been over by
Yeah.
now. And so it's hard to do that for Superman, where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna put him in this world where it's like really realistic and whatnot. It's like, no, you should be campy and goofy from the bat, you know, like it's hard to go that route. And that was one of my frustrating things going into that, where it's sort of the analogy that like I always think of, like the Zack Snyder Man of Steel movie is like, it reminds me of like a senior high school student who's like trying to replicate like what philosophers do, but just comes off as like a pretentious, like shitty know-it-all who doesn't actually know everything, and
Mm-hmm.
like thinks he's like, oh yeah, like I nailed this psych quiz, or this like philosophical um like paper or whatnot, and then he comes back and he gets like a D-minus. He's like, oh, you just don't understand me, you know, like I just like my way of thinking is just so beyond yours. It's like, well, no, you just don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
uh and so it's just like that frustrating thing where uh, you thought, you believed right in that trailer, like, oh man, they could do this, they could really like make this emotional Superman arc. And like, even when I saw that first trailer, I didn't think to myself like, oh man, this is going to be exactly like I didn't think to myself, man, I want this to be exactly like the Batman trilogy, where it's like so realistic and like very grounded and stuff. Because when I saw that trailer, I wasn't even thinking that. I was like, this is just going to be an emotional Superman story.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very excited for that. And then it wasn't. And I was like, because they try, instead of focusing on a very emotional Superman story, which I guess their definition of emotion is having
People
Superman
rage
have,
out at it because that's what
no,
I
not even
did.
that. It's like emotional Superman story to them is Superman having two of the shittiest dads on Krypton and Earth. Like, I guess the dad on Krypton, it wasn't his fault just because he just died, and then the dad on Earth, played by Kevin Costner, is like, that guy was the worst father figure ever to someone who's going through something like that. Like,
What
and
should I
like
do? Let them die? Maybe.
yeah,
Fuck
it's
off.
like, I know, and it's like that's the exact opposite of what like Mr. Kent is like raising raising Clark when he's growing up through all this, the exact opposite of what he should be doing, and it's just ridiculous. And it's because they were so set on this mindset of like, oh well, in our like realistic universe, what would a Kentucky man who's like sort of like this old dude who's probably like on the side of Republicans and stuff, like what would he think about this, like trying to realistically raise this kid but like keep him a secret because he doesn't want to be judged for it and whatnot. It's like it's really dumb, and it upsets me because even though I'm not as obviously not as big of a fan of Superman as like either you or Greg Miller or whatnot, it was so frustrating because I was very prepared for this like really cool emotional story that didn't have to be realistic like the Batman Dark Knight trilogy. It didn't have to do any of that. It just had to be a well-told story, and it wasn't. It was very frustrating because I'm just talking in circles.
You're good.
But it's just because I haven't talked about this, but it sucks that they were like, oh, the Dark Knight formula worked, so that should work for every superhero, right? And it's like, well, no, the Iron Man formula works for Iron Man. I guess Doctor Strange a little bit, but Doctor Strange even was a little different. But like Iron Man's formula wouldn't work for like Captain America or even like Thor for that matter. And they had their own ways of introducing each character, so it was like they just didn't know how to differentiate each character to give them their own personality on screen, and that's where I think that's why really this universe is in trouble, because just the personalities of these characters aren't where they need to be, and they're not as different as they need to be, because Avengers was so successful because of the personality difference between Tony Stark and Captain America, and the sort of competition between Hulk and Thor, and even the differences between Black Widow and Captain America and Winter Soldier and all that stuff. Like, you like to see these characters together because you like to see why they're so different, and even because those differences like grow together and whatnot, and you just don't see it. Like, they say they have differences in the DCEU universe between Batman and Superman, but then you don't really see it, you know. So.
They're literally the same person. That's the problem. Yeah.
They literally have the same mother's name.
But like we're talking about Batman v Superman, but whatever.
We're just talking about this universe as a whole.
Yeah, pretty much. Because like in Batman v Superman, like Clark is like so moody and brooding, and just like they're literally the same person, because like there's no hope for that character whatsoever. Like all that hope is like pretty much just dashed away. And the problem with Superman in these movies, because like I said, they literally fucked it up until like the last 20 minutes of Justice League, and that's the only time he's ever been Superman ever.
My question for you, really quick, as a sidebar, is,
yeah, sure.
Like, no, like he got to the point where you wanted him to be. He's now the Superman you want him to be. Does it still feel like, does that feel disingenuous to you because of how quickly that flipped for his character, right? Or like, yeah, literally up until the moment he died, he was this like moody, and even like after he like came back, right, he was like this sort of like brooding sort of dude until he comes back to fight Steppenwolf, right? So like, how does that feel for you as a Superman fan?
Like it's so weird, dude, because it's like it is like a 100% contradiction of everything those movies are and what that character is. Because like when I think about it, like really, it's like one of the main reasons why I rage about like them ruining Superman is because like the way he's been told, the way like there's no hope for that character. There's no character for like. I don't even see like how he became the character he's supposed to be in this at the end of that movie, like in any way, shape, or form. Like his father didn't teach him that way, and like even if his space dad didn't do that really either, because like it was just a ghost the entire time, and like in Batman v Superman, like he had no moments of that whatsoever. So he just comes back just this smiling, hopeful character, which is like, and like the problem is like when I think about Superman, I think about a character who, like, someone you strive to be, not really a Jesus complex, but a Jesus complex, of a person.
He has the ability to be.
Yeah, and it's like there's someone you can't do, and something you can't do, and like Superman can do, and like that can empower you because, like, you're giving me this hope that I can actually do this myself. And like the whole problem with like their Superman and like killing him off and everything, like just totally just like unceremoniously just killing him off for like no reason whatsoever. By the way, like the whole raising dirt thing from the end of Batman v Superman, he wasn't alive. He was totally just dead.
Yeah, it was just like an earthquake happened or something. It's so fucking dumb.
But like it makes me angry because like for anyone who's like doesn't like Superman already, you're sure as fuck not gonna like him even more like, by the end of Justice League. Is like, like you have to like raise him up and like make him that person, make him the opposite of Batman, make him someone who's like, I want to go through this like the straight and narrow route and like do my best. Like the okay, another scene with Batman v Superman. Man, we talk about this movie a lot. Like the whole court scene where he was like saying like, oh, I want to take accountability for this. Like this terrible thing has happened. Like even though I know it's not my fault, like people are questioning me, and I'm willing to step up and be the person and be the symbol of like taking responsibility for this whole everything that's happening. And what they do, they literally just blow it up. So it's like, what the fuck? Like I can't get an inch with this character till the end, but I can't get an inch of like who this character actually is and what he stands for. And
I honestly think it all comes back to Man of Steel.
That's why it's the worst movie, dude.
Because this movie just set up this entire universe to just be an entire fuckfest.
Like you destroy an entire city in that movie, and when you snap General Zod's neck, you're like, oh, I had this great emotional moment. Then immediately the next scene, I just crashed the satellite. Hey, how I'm doing? I'm Superman.
The way that movie should have been laid out is that like you shouldn't even started with Krypton. You should have literally started with Clark Kent as like this normal kid who like is growing up and he eventually starts discovering these powers, right? And like sort of along the lines of how the guy who wrote Chronicle, he has a Superman series, Max
Landis.
Max Landis. His way of sort of telling Clark Kent's sort of growing, like how he grows up and stuff, like a way like that, or maybe some other way. I can't think of another example where like you see Clark Kent grow up with these powers, but you still see him struggle with like how to be a good person, and maybe he goes through like several events that like maybe he like makes a decision that reflects poorly on him and makes him seem like he's like a total dick, and then eventually he wants to make that better in like when he's a teenager or something, to sort of see him, to understand at the point when he's Superman like why he wants to make things right all the time. Like you should have given him interesting character development while he's growing up to see why he is how he is as an adult, because that's why we liked all the characters from MCU and like why they all come together in Avengers, is because like you get to see their background story and you get to see it in a well-told story, and you understand like where they come from on their stances. And the problem with the Superman is like you don't understand where he's coming from half the time.
There's no point in the movies, any of the movies, where it's like he makes this clear lines like, I don't kill. So like killing Zod could be like whatever, and like except that whole yell thing, but then like immediately like, oh, I'll kill Doomsday just because like he's there. So like there's no consistency, and that's like the whole issue. And like to throw this right back at you, Barrett, like how do you feel of this Batman by the end of it? Like he was a brutal person who was like very tortured in Batman v Superman, but in this one is just like, I guess he decides not to kill anymore.
Well, like I don't think he really.
Does he earn his thing too? That's what I'm asking you. Just throwing it right back at you.
At this point, I'm not even upset that he kills people. Like that was something like I was pissed about, definitely coming out of BBS. But as time went on, I was like, okay, you can have interpretation of Batman where he decides to kill people.
Yeah, sure.
Even though that mainly goes against his whole character, because his whole character is he doesn't want, even if he decides to kill a bad guy, he knows that he might be affecting someone who might not be a criminal, who could be affected by like, oh shit, someone who might be bad, who I still know and possibly love is now dead. Like that's his whole stance, is that like he doesn't want anyone to experience what he experienced when he was a kid, right?
Right.
And so, but eventually I was like, all right, fuck it, fine. The thing I was more upset about in this movie was like that he just drinks alcohol. It's like, all right, come on, man. Like one of the coolest things that I always loved about Bruce Wayne is that he like never drinks. It was like a secret of his where I forget what he always pours himself, but it's some like fruity, like it might just be like apple juice or something. There's some like fruit, like some juice that he just pours himself, and he tells people it's like alcohol or something. He like never is actually drunk because he's one of those people who's like always needs to be analytical and always needs to be on like be able to be in control of the situation when he needs to be in control of the situation. This is
Mm.
like one of those things when he like absolutely they probably told him like, all right, like Ben Affleck pour a realistic like size like glass of vodka or whatever you guys are drinking, whiskey, and then Ben Affleck like pours it to the brim, and just like it's like I'm getting fucked up tonight, and so it's like one of those things where it like I feel like that really goes against like Bruce Wayne's character, to an extent where like maybe on like looking at surface level that might not be something that you pick up on right away, but it's like I still think it's one of those important key things where Bruce just naturally wouldn't put himself in a situation where he's like getting super drunk and whatnot. And so at the end of this Justice League is one of those things where I just
Are you just like checked out and just like I don't
I'm
care?
checked out. Like I don't care
Mm.
because I could tell through this entire movie that Ben Affleck didn't care. Like he's also checked out. He's also trying to get drunk on set, and he's also like, "Yeah, I want to leave this universe already." And it's like, all right, like that sucks, but whatever. And at this point, I've accepted that I probably won't care about a Batman movie for another 20 years until like because I honestly, realistically think that's the next time we'll get another Batman movie that's not tied to this universe because they'll still go on with this universe for another 10 years. We'll get a maybe one or two Batman movies, one with Ben Affleck and then one with whoever decides to replace him. And then eventually something will happen where they put a bunch of money into a movie, Justice League 2 or whatever, and they'll make absolutely crap on it because they'll realize that only true fanboys and not fanboys to just DC Comics, but fanboys to just this universe are going, and they're just gonna lose a lot of money at one point, and they're just gonna be like, we can't do this anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think at one point they will realize like maybe we should just not try to force this whole universe thing. Let's go back to just making singular movies for these different characters, and if we can line it up correctly and maybe have them share a universe, like maybe we can do that. And I think that decision and that route for them to do that is going to take another 15, 20 years. So, yeah, I've accepted it at this point, and now I just have to rely on hopefully Rocksteady's next game being Batman related somehow that I can care about Batman entity anytime soon. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, right now I'm definitely like I don't care, and that it's literally the one thing you need to tell me on this universe is caring about Batman, and I don't. So, um, but yeah, and
Mm.
it sucks because they're like cool casting choices in this universe. Like I
I
honestly
know.
think if you give like again, like I'm not sold on Ben Affleck, but like if like you gave Henry Cavill the right direction and the right kind of script, I think Henry Cavill would be an awesome Superman.
Like,
I
oh my
like
god, he can actually smile and emote. That's like that's I haven't seen these in any of these movies. That's
and then
amazing.
like Jason Momoa as Aquaman is a fucking great idea, and Gal Gadot as Wonder
Wonder
Woman.
Woman.
Like I didn't know her at all before she was cast. I knew she was in a Fast and Furious movie at one point before this, but I wasn't like against her, but I wasn't like totally like for it. And then and I wasn't even sold on her during BBS, but it was like Wonder Woman where I got to say like, oh yeah, like she is great. So
Yeah.
it sort of sucks that like they're stuck in this really crappy universe that will inevitably implode on itself at one point. Because like you mean hopefully after this universe crashes and burns, we start getting good DC movies. But it then sucks where it's like they're not going to be a part of that realistically, like when they decide to reboot this whole thing, you imagine that they're going to recast the entire universe and whatnot. So it sucks that they're forever tied to the shitty era of DC movies.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we've been extremely negative on this movie,
Absolutely.
which is well earned. But like like any well, you can't really remember most of it, but like any standouts from it that you can remember that you actually enjoyed from this movie.
I mean, I liked the line where Superman feeds back the whole like "Do you bleed?" and stuff like that was a cool, like, sort of badass, and that's sort of where I like Superman the most is when he's sort of like when he's a dick and when he's sort of a villain. You know, that's why I think
Hmm.
he's the most interesting because he's so overpowered that he's actually becomes an interesting villain of like how do you take him down? I know the answer is kryptonite, but there's technically not kryptonite, but there technically is kryptonite in this
Why
universe.
didn't he have kryptonite with him?
But he like yeah, because he uses kryptonite all of the time in BBS, and then his one thought in this one was like, "Nah, I won't use kryptonite. Fuck that."
I
Like,
mean, like
okay,
he's way too trusting in this movie. Like you just see him like go out of the ceiling, and then like like I would immediately think like something's wrong. So like let me be prepared because I don't know what the
yeah,
fuck is gonna happen. But
and
uh,
yeah, like the way they like it was cool that they teased
Legion of Doom.
like the old gods and like Black
Oh yeah,
Adam and like the
lanterns
Green
and
Lantern and whatnot, but it was like Danny Juarez makes a good point on Zero Life this week, where it's like that's how you decide to introduce those characters into this universe is through a flashback, and the flashback is of like a story from like fucking millions of years ago. Like that's how you decided to do this, and
well,
then
it's
like
better than YouTube videos from BBC. That'd be
oh
Superman.
god, yeah, that's true. But to be fair, that's how Spider-Man was introduced to. I guess how was Spider-Man introduced to MCU? I feel like it was through a YouTube video. I feel like that's like how they first showed him was like
But
this
he was actually
video.
there as well. So
That's true. That's true. But I understand like Ezra Miller was fun. Like I like the guy who played Cyborg. He was cool. Like, and I feel like at the end they give me an inch of like where I want Cyborg to be, but he's not there yet. But like hopefully he could be there in the future. Like a little more confident, a little more like sassy and fun. Um, yeah, I feel like again like the one line I knew there were one liners that I enjoyed, but it was still like because the general like my general consensus of that movie is forgettable. Like even the fun parts I had like I'm still like forgetting. And that
mm-hmm.
bums me out because like I do enjoy this movie to an extent, but it's just like it's to an extent, you know.
Yeah, I totally feel you, dude. Like for me, like obviously, like I said, like the last 20 minutes are like the thing that I'm always wanting. I really enjoyed with that. Especially the line with Superman, like speaking something about truth. And like Superman's like, I believe in truth. I'm also a big fan of justice, and punches him. I was like, yes, that's awesome. Um, Also, like when Superman comes back in general, just like that whole fight scene was actually pretty cool. Like with
Yeah,
Flash going behind him and like Superman like
yeah,
eyes is totally seeing him.
yeah. That was cool.
That was all. That was really awesome. I like Jason Momoa a lot actually in this movie.
He's super
Like
fun,
the
and he like because Aquaman is definitely a character like that you hear about and you make fun of him, and they even make jokes about this. Like, so you speak to fish and stuff. It's like
yeah.
they're very well aware of like how like uninteresting a character Aquaman is, and then you put someone as fun as Jason Momoa into that role. Like naturally, it's just gonna like you're gonna love that character because he's so fun, because he's so energetic and like badass and like brooding in his own way, but like still like he has like the one of the standout moments for me is when he's sitting on Wonder Woman's lasso and he's like
Yes.
bringing out this heartfelt thing. And he's like, I don't know, I've never been part of a group before, and it's like really cool that I get to be a part of this now. And then he like sits up and like the lasso's under him, and then he gives like if you say anything about this, I will kill you. And Flash is like, I don't remember anything after you said we're all gonna die. So there's been fun moments definitely with him on that front, and like it was one of those weird things where one of the standout moments, maybe not for like not because it was good, it was a standout of like it was weird to have J.K. Simmons playing Gordon when like J.K. Simmons is J. Jonah Jameson, like that is he's just that character. He's also a great musician and music instructor from the movie Whiplash. And those are the only two roles I can ever really see him in. And to see him as Gordon felt like dirty almost. Like I felt wrong like watching it. Like I don't know. Like he was fine. There's nothing like off about him, but it was just like seeing him as that role was just very. I don't know. I feel like there are many other actors I'd rather see in that role before J.K. Simmons.
Sure.
So that was definitely a moment for me. I was like, this is. I knew they've been talking about your casting for 2 years at this point, but it's still weird for me to take in. So, yeah.
Another nice touch I liked about the movie, even though as off-putting as it is, but it's still cool. I found it anyway. Was like doing like the themes, like that 1989 Batman theme and like the Superman theme, like out of nowhere too. It's like, oh, okay, like I recognize this thing.
They watched Power Rangers a couple months before. Like, you guys remember when they brought like the old school Power Rangers theme back and like, in a way, like let's just do that. But, like, cooler, I guess. I don't know, man. I feel like that was definitely that was absolutely a Joss Whedon call.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because there's no way Zack Snyder would have thought of that.
Speaking of like those two, like it's interesting because like someone pointed this out to me, like when it was still just a Zack Snyder movie and you look at like the first like trailer of that movie, everybody's like just dark and black. It's like it was like a whole night scene, like the whole ending scene was just all in night, and as soon as like Joss Whedon took over, like the sky is red and like people actually have color at the end, and I was like, everything just stands out a lot more than before.
Yeah, I know Whedon is. I don't know if it's like a rumor at this point or if they actually confirmed it, or Whedon's going to be directing a Batgirl movie. That's probably
I've heard that.
The movie I'm most excited for at this point because like the recent revival of Batgirl and her comic series has been very well received recently, and it'd be cool to see him as someone who ran Buffy the Vampire Slayer and did the Avengers and things like that. Like it would. I'm excited to see like how he takes a like newer sort of interpretation of Batgirl. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it won't be part of that universe either, so it'll be completely good for that.
But yeah, and again, it's just one of those things. It's weird to think that like you watch this movie, at the end of this movie when they go to Arkham Asylum and like what's his face? Fake ass Joker cell opens up. Lex Luthor's jail cell opens up. It's one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, Arkham Asylum technically exists in this universe. And then you think for a moment, Jared Leto's Joker technically exists in this universe, and it's still just very jarring.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't it just doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Oh my god, it's such a mess. But like I'm after saying off of this, like I'm totally gonna see that movie again, and I'm gonna see that movie again with my best friend Tony, because he really wanted to see it again, but he just was just such a rip into it. So like we're just gonna wait for like a few weeks later when the theater's empty, and we just sit there and just just go to town on it.
A couple of days for that, to be honest.
Yeah. Because like we never talk in movies, like we're usually respectful and just just watch the movies, just like enjoy it for what it was. But like there's like multiple times in that movie we just like lean to each other like, did that really just fucking happen? like not in a surprise way, but like not in a good way, but in a really bad way. There's
there are very few bad movies I would ever want to see again in a movie or like in a theater,
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't even think of an example. Like I'm definitely never gonna watch this movie again. Like I have no interest in seeing this movie again.
And that's probably like the biggest. That's probably the biggest endorsement I could say about this movie too, which is weird because it's like what Man of Steel and Batman v Super. I haven't seen them. I only seen them once, and I never want to fucking see them again. I never want to see them again. Like by myself in a theater looking at or in a TV screen. No, I never want to see those movies again. But like Justice League, at least it's good enough for me to like want to see it again, to like rip on it. Like that's how I feel about it.
Weirdly enough, these movies make me want to like start the MCU over again because I think it makes me think about like how well the MCU is done, and even though like the Avengers isn't probably in my top 5 of the MCU movies, it's still a great like event,
Mm-hmm.
It's lower on my list because like I don't think it's like a great like story or anything, but there's still like great moments. And again, it's like a crossover event. You don't like for comics, you don't go to crossover events for substance or anything. You go for the spectacle, and like they really nail it in that movie. And so, because you still like, even though there's not a lot of there's a little character development in those movies, but not a lot, not like the in-depth stuff that I usually like. But you still, because you get to spend so much time with all these characters, it still like matters to you. Like,
Yeah.
when they finally team up, and like when they let Nick Fury down, and like when Coulson dies, and all of this stuff, like it still like is important. So it just makes it like, just how terribly this universe is done. It just makes me like want to go back and watch all of the MCU, because it's just done so well. So I guess that's the endorsement. Just oh, yeah, it makes me want to watch better comic book movies.
Oh man. Well, that's pretty much everything I need to ask you there. Like, is there anything you want to say? Anything else about this movie?
Not about this movie. Definitely not about this movie. I have no more thoughts. Honestly, my only other thought about comic book movies right now is Thor Ragnarok's great.
Oh, that movie was so fucking good,
Taika
dude.
Waititi should just direct everything.
Like, Jesus Christ, it was so good.
Direct a DC movie, and maybe he could help fix this universe. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? But I just want to say that Korg and Meek are the best MCU characters of the MCU universe. They are the one true pairing, and I would like to see a buddy cop film based off of them. And that's my thoughts on Thor Ragnarok. That's my thoughts on Justice League, and that's all my thoughts.
All right. Well, this has been Fresh Off the Dome, your topic-based podcast, just about talking about anything. Barrett, pimp your shit, man. Who are you? Where are you from?
I am an employee of IGN.com, where I work on gameplay videos. If you see a like first 15 of a game, or like a graphics comparison, you can see that, and you can think Barrett might have worked on that video. I also help produce Nintendo Voice Chat, which is IGN's Nintendo podcast. And so if you watch the YouTube version of that, you can definitely see some hot goofs that I try to sneak in every episode, which Nabeshin, you've pointed out on Twitter a couple times.
Oh yeah, #1 fan, dude.
Every once in a while, I'll try to sneak in a picture of Donkey Kong's face, or if they make a joke about Fraser, I'll sneak in a picture of Fraser's face. It's a bunch of random faces I'll just sneak into that show. And then I also, on the side, I also run a YouTube channel called Zero Life, youtube.com/ZeroLife, where we have a weekly podcast every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we talk about nerdy pop culture stuff, video game stuff. It's a very general podcast that is hosted by myself and Sean Pitts, and also Danny Juarez when Sean is not available. And what else? Yeah, it's really about it. And you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Bananlerchong. And that's where you can find me on the internet.
All right. And I have been your host, Brian Nabeshin Jackson. You can follow me on Twitter at Nabeshin186. That's Nabeshin186. Also do a podcast, Irrational Passions. Talk about video games constantly. Every Friday, you can catch us live at around 7:30 Eastern Standard Time.
Are you guys
normally
still doing an episode this week, even though it's Thanksgiving weekend?
Oh yeah. Alex never stops. So yeah, we always do.
Yeah, he never stops, never stopping. You know.
Yeah, that boy wanted to come on this episode because he's like, he knew I wasn't a big fan of it, and he knows how you are, so he's like, oh, like, can I? He wanted to be on.
He just knew it's like, this episode is going to be entire shit talk. I don't want it to be that way.
But like, he unfortunately had to work tonight, so like, it was just one of those things. But this has been Fresh Off the Dome. Thank you, Barrett, for joining me for this. This was a great talk, man. And until next time, DavePinoypet.com. It's been my pleasure to serve you. Go to sleep. Goodbye.